You look at the United States population and you take away the kids and you take away the elderly that are not in the market for buying or renting, you end up with about 60 to 80% of the potential population with a mindset geared toward renting. So it's a no-brainer for us to say that multifamily is going to be in demand in the next few decades, while these two generations are pushing demand higher and higher. We're nearing the top of the market. And when you get to that phase of the cycle, usually there is a lot of overhype and extra pay, right? People are overpaying for properties in major MSAs. So the correction is going to impact major MSAs historically more than it does secondary markets. So we focus on secondary markets.
This episode brought to you by Suites at Madison. Meeting and conference rooms for rent by the hour, week, month, or year. Suites at Madison, where business gets done. Check them out at www.downtowntampaoffice.com. Now, on to the show.
You are listening to the Invest Florida Real Estate Show, covering topics in lending, buy and sell strategies, property management, hot markets, and tips and tools to guide you along the way on your path to real estate success. You want Florida investment real estate talk? You have come to the right place. And now, our hosts, Eric Odom and Steven Silverman.
Welcome to another episode of the Invest Florida Real Estate Show. This is your co-host, Eric Odom, along with Steven Silverman. Steven, it's been a very busy week.
Beginning of the year is always busy, and it's been cold, and we've been growing and just trying to use the time that we had to build our infrastructure a little.
Yeah, we added another property manager. It became necessary because we have taken on additional space to manage, and we were going crazy.
And the piles on your desk were getting too high.
God. Steven and I are better being out in front and trying to drive deals. We can do the property management stuff ourselves, but it's better to have somebody that's what they're dedicated to doing, just that they sit there all day and they're able to follow up on items. And certainly we throw our hat in the ring and try to help when we can, pull the wagon. But we were at a point recently that we just couldn't handle anymore than we had. We brought on some new properties. We had clients that we bought properties for, and we've taken on trying to absorb those into the system right now. We just couldn't do any more than we're doing. So we're really happy to have a new property manager on staff, and it's going to
which leaves more time to do some podcasts and have some fun.
Yeah, there we go. Some things that we might be able to help other people and hopefully help ourselves in return. We'll see how that works. Very excited about 2018. I have a very, very positive outlook for what's going to happen for us over the next year. I wanted to just give a shout out. Robert from Tampa had sent us an email, and he said, "When are you having another Mixer networking event?" It seems like it's been a while. Robert, we just had one last week. I don't know how you missed the memo on that.
We were very fussy who we invited, Robert.
Yeah, maybe. But I just want to remind you, the events that we have are both on our meetup group and our Facebook page. And if you go to the investfloridashow.com, you'll be able to get subscribe to the updates and be included in our networking events. We just recently had Rod Cleef here, and he talked about doing apartment investing and goal setting and motivations for 2018. Had a great turnout. So go check out www.investfloridashow.com and sign up for our meetup group and for our Facebook page, and you'll be notified of events as they come out. If you sign up, give us our email. We'll give you email blast too, if that's more effective.
And the meetups are a great supplement to the podcast because people meet other people, and we've seen them do deals out of those meetings.
There's no doubt. They do deals. They find other people, and they're able to look people in the eye and figure out who they can do business with. And the other thing, Steven, is although we do air those discussions as podcasts,
sometimes.
No, well, we always. But the situation is that the listeners are able to ask questions specifically. A lot of the emails that we get over the week are individuals saying, "Why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you ask that?" Well, gosh, guys, I mean, why why don't you come in and let me know when you want to come in and listen to the show, and we'll be happy to put you on. You can ask questions. We want to make sure we're providing that information, but that's what the meetups do. You have the opportunity to look people in the eye and maybe network with some folks that might be able to give you a loan or sell you a house or partner with you on some deal. And you're also able to participate in the show and ask questions. And we feel like it's a win-win-win for everybody. So attention to those things. And definitely we'd love to have you for the folks that are in the Tampa Bay area. We still would like to go down to Miami. We've had some requests for people to go down to Miami, and that might be happening soon. Just a matter of when we can find the time to get out from behind the desk and the workload. Stephen, we've got a multifamily guy today talking about identifying markets.
Yeah, and it's an important discussion because, we have clients, everybody's looking for things, complaining how difficult it is to find things, and it is hard to find things, but here's someone who has a system, and we can all learn a little from him.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead. Without further ado, let's get in and roll with our guest.
Today we have with us Joseph Gozlan. Joseph is a former lieutenant in the Israeli Defense Forces. In 2007, Joseph and Rita relocated from Israel to Plano, Texas, and in early 2008 started their U.S. real estate investment journey. Not long after they arrived, Joseph acquired a 22-unit multifamily project in Salina, Texas, followed by the acquisition of 130 units in 2 multifamily properties in Lubbock, Texas in 2017. He is now in the process of closing on a 97-unit apartment community, and his goal is to acquire more than 1,500 units by the end of 2018. Recently, family offices have been reaching out to Joseph to explore collaborating on opportunities in the markets in which they operate. Joseph, welcome to the Invest Florida show.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Joseph. Really appreciate you investing the time with us today. Tell us just sort of a little bit of a background on how you got into real estate and why you selected multifamily.
Yeah, so I didn't start with multifamily. We got started as accidental landlords. A lot of the listeners out there, a lot of the people I know that started in real estate started this way. And we just bought a property for ourselves, my wife and I. We were a young couple, no kids, and it was just too big for us. So we decided to rent it out. And then you start seeing all the benefits of the rent and the tax benefit and all that. So kind of that's how we got started getting hooked up on real estate. And then we did a few years doing singles. When we moved to the States, it was 2007, right when everything blew up. So it was a great opportunity. And we recognized that as a great opportunity to buy. So we bought singles, and that's how our career started. Then a few years ago, about 2015, that's where I said, okay, this rental real estate thing is great, but I don't feel it's scalable enough for me. So what else is out there? And I researched a lot of different kinds of real estate, ended up finding multifamily as a vehicle that made the most sense to me.
Mm-hmm. And tell us about that. Like it made the most sense to you, and as opposed to single family. Like what were the reasons for that?
Yeah, so we're looking at 2 very, very big generations that are shifting their preference from buying to renting. So the first generation is the baby boomers, 75 million people in that generation. They are just done. They don't want to do mowing anymore. They don't want to clean gutters. They don't want to fix roofs. They just want to be able to pick up a phone and say, hey, my faucet is leaking, come fix it, right? So, and they don't need that much space. They want to downsize after the kids leave to college. That's a very, very big portion of the population that is shifting toward renting. On the other side of the spectrum, we have the millennials that have a few major contributing factors to their generational shift towards renting. And that is when they were looking around in 2008, they were teenagers and they saw their parents lose their jobs, lose their homes, go through foreclosure. That was a pretty traumatic experience for that generation. You add to this the fact that most of them leave the universities and the colleges with an enormous debt that is just inhibiting them from doing anything. when it comes to big financial decisions. And then lastly, as a generation, they seem to prefer to be able to move around more easily. They want to follow the jobs. They want to follow the trends. They want to go to the hype cities and all the cool places to be. So that's the third factor that basically says, we don't want to buy. We don't want to settle down here. We don't want the headache. We just want to rent. So, and there are 77 million, right? So when you combine those two populations and you look at the United States population and you take away the kids and you take away the elderly that are not in the market for buying or renting, you end up with about 60 to 80% of the potential population with a mindset geared toward renting. So it's a no-brainer for us to say that multifamily is going to be in demand in the next few decades, while these two generations are pushing demand higher and higher.
And what's interesting about it, there's another segment of the population, and we recently had a podcast on, as people get a little bit older than that, they need some assisted living, and that's a whole other type of renting, but still it's a shift.
Absolutely. The baby boomers are moving from houses to apartments. That means that their parents, if they're still around, are going to need to find a place. They don't have the capacity to take care of them anymore. So assisted living becomes more and more popular. So that you're absolutely right. That's another segment that gets out of regular single family housing and into renting apartments or assisted living locations.
Now, Joseph, you were based out of Texas, correct?
That's correct.
And you're investing in apartment complexes in Texas, correct?
Yes. A few other places.
And a few other places too. And I was just going to ask you the next question was that Texas and Florida are compared for a lot of reasons, not the least of which they tend to be very have favorable laws towards landlords. But what were some of the factors that you look at? Let's talk about, like, okay, you got into multifamily investing and now you have some experience. So what are the factors that you look at when you're identifying markets that you want to move into and invest in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked that a lot. And many people are just being drawn to the major market, right? In Texas, it's Dallas, and it's Austin, and it's Houston. And in Florida, I'm sure Orlando is one of the big ones. But what we're looking for is secondary markets. And the reason is that we are nearing, and everybody believes that, but nobody has a crystal ball, but we're nearing the top of the market. And when you get to that phase of the cycle, usually there is a lot of overhype and extra pay, right? People are overpaying for properties in major MSAs. So the correction is going to impact major MSAs historically more than it does secondary markets. So we focus on secondary markets. And when we look at the secondary market, we have a few factors that we look at. The first factor that we're looking for is employment, right? Who are the major employers in town? What drives the economy for those employers? Is it a one employer town where if something happens to that employer, the entire town goes dead? And it doesn't have to be necessarily the employer's financial situation. I've looked at a town in Oklahoma where they had a huge factory and it was doing great financially, but then a tornado came in and destroyed the factory. That's something that is beyond our control, but it kills, economically, it kills that town. So we're looking at the employers in town. That's the first thing we look at, and what's their strength and what's their growth trajectory. And that's one thing. Going forward is, other than the employers, how is the employment situation in town? Are we looking at a low unemployment rate or a higher unemployment rate? What was the trend over the last few years? What happened back in 2008? This is another very important factor that we're looking at, is how is that location handled in economic crisis? And obviously we want the lowest unemployment rate we can find and good growth opportunities when it comes to employment. Economic drivers are a third thing that we're looking at, and we're looking for what drives the city, right? So sometimes it's those employers that we talked about Sometimes it's oil and gas. Sometimes it's a university town, right? So we're looking at what is the main economic drivers and how is that going to play itself out in the next few years. Now, obviously, we don't have crystal balls, but we're trying to look at historic trends and try to project forward to see what we believe is going to happen.
So a question I have is when you're looking at markets, is your comfort, there's different tiers of the markets. There's the upscale luxury, there's the middle level, like working class or more affordable type of apartments, and then the lower end apartments. Where is your comfort level in investing in those, and for what reason?
Yeah, so apartment complexes have four major classes, right? A, B, C, and D. The A classes are the brand new builds with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The B class properties are usually the same kind of property, just a little bit older, 10, 15 years old. In those, you would usually find young professionals and what you would call a white collar profession. The C-class properties are the blue collar, the people that work in retail and the services industries. And D-class is, for lack of a better term, war zones, right? It's rough neighborhoods, rough tenant base that you need, a shotgun and two German shepherds to come anywhere near the property, right? So,
that sounds like our office, Stephen.
Yeah, I think that's like where we work.
So, well, I hope you got the German Shepherds.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of gray in between, right? So you would hear brokers and people talk about C plus or B minus and all kind of scale in between those classes. But for us, we try to focus on the B and C class range because the way we look at it, when the economy is doing great, then D upgrades to C, C upgrades to B, B upgrades to A buys a house. When the economy is tanking, A downgrades to B, B downgrades to C, C downgrades to D. So the B and C class is right there in the middle that no matter what happens to the economy, there's always a stream of potential residents coming in either from the top or from the bottom. And that's really where our comfort zone is.
Yeah, so the A and D have got nowhere to go.
That is correct. Now, A class have such low yields and such low returns that are usually only owned by institutionals and insurance company and family offices that just trying to find a place to park their money safely and just not lose to inflation. The D class properties, I know some people that make a great amount of money out of working D-class properties, but it's a whole different kind of headache that I'm just not prepared to take on.
So where do you figure in these different properties? In what kind of cap rates do you look at for each of these classes of apartments?
So I'll be a little bit controversial with my answer, but I don't care about cap rate when I buy. So I look at a property and just, Churchill used to say there's liars, damn liars, and then there's statisticians, right? So I can take any property and show you whatever cap rate you want just by playing with my income and my expenses. And I don't want to look at that. What I'm looking for is what is the property going to be worth when I'm done working on it? And when I say working on it, it means sometimes it's rehab, sometimes it's just a management play, sometimes it's a combination of both, right? So what is it going to be worth when I'm done with it? And then I'm going to take back and say, okay, how much is it going to cost me? How much capital expense I'm going to have to invest in order to get to that target price? And then I also look at how much time it's going to take me and how much do I value my time? Because if it's going to take a 2-year project where I'm going to work really hard on a project to turn it around, I want to get compensated for that 2-year period of a really, really hard work, right? Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, I basically calculate my offer price going backwards. So where am I going to be? Less how much it's going to cost me, less how much my time is worth, That's what I'm willing to offer. And if the cap rate is 1 or 21, so be it.
Yeah, I don't think it's really that controversial, Joseph, to be honest with you. But it's a great way of stating value add property. Most of our listeners or our guests will come on and say, we do value add property. And we try to ask them how to explain that. Explain what a value add is. And they say, well, we increase the value. And people say, how do you increase the value? And it's confusing when people say value add, but that was probably the best definition of value add I've ever heard. You don't really care. All you're saying is at the end of the day, I know that I can either increase the rents or I can add a swimming pool and I can increase the rents from that, or I can put X number of dollars into it. At the end of the day, I'm going to be able to sell it for X number of dollars more that I'm paying for it. And it has to cover my salary and provide investors with a return. And I think that's a really succinct way of basically saying value add, right?
That is correct. Yes. And we invest with investors, right? So we don't bring all the funds ourselves. And part of that equation is what do we promise our investors? Can we make that threshold, right? And if we cannot pay our investors, we can't buy the property. It's that simple.
Yeah. And we have a big issue when we're particularly with not first time, but relatively inexperienced multifamily buyers looking at a property and they're purchasing it from a multifamily seller who's really disorganized. The expenses are kept in a shoebox and we're rooting around trying to replace what the expense and income statement is. And at the end of the day, I have the same conversation with them. And all these small apartment complexes, I can give you a rule of thumb of what the expenses are going to run. I can give you a rule of thumb of what the rents are going to run. And it's really irrelevant what happened in the past. So we can invest a lot of time in trying to figure out what's there. Yeah, there's some value to it. But at the end of the day, it's what you're going to do with it. And it's a really hard thing for a relatively inexperienced investor to get their hands around because they really want to understand like how much are you paying for this and how much are you paying for that. And yeah, it has some relevance, but at the end of the day, when you're experienced, you know what those expenses are. And you know if you're managing it, what it's going to end up being. And then it just comes back to, as you say, the deferred maintenance. How much do I have to put into it to fix it? And those things you really have to know. But what the electric bill is, you know what electric should be. You know what water should be. And if it's not in that number, you know how to fix it because you have experience in doing it. But it's a chicken and the egg scenario with a lot of multifamily investors,
Well, I think you hit it on the head here. We personally only get 2 numbers out of the broker or the seller that we work with. We're looking at utility bills because what we've learned is that it could be local. So there are certain cities and certain municipalities that the water bill is extremely high.
Yeah.
That just because that's what they charge in that area.
Yeah.
And this is something that we can absolutely verify by getting the bills. And that's something that we ask as part of the due diligence document.
Right.
So we get that. And the second question we take from the seller or the broker is who's paying for the utilities? Is there a RUB system? Is it individually metered? And so on. Everything else we put into the underwriting ourselves. Mm-hmm. We go do a market survey. We go shop the other properties around it. We determine what we believe is a potential rent that we can get for these properties. And then we know how much we pay for payroll. We know how much we pay for maintenance. We know how much a gallon of paint costs us because the price that we get at our scales is not the price that a guy that goes out to Home Depot pays. And it's also not, on the other side, not the price that a portfolio that has 15,000 apartments get, right?
Right.
So this is really where the only numbers we're looking at is utilities. Everything else comes from our own numbers, our own research, our own market survey.
So Joseph, let's back up a little bit. We covered at the beginning how you identify a market, and you jumped ahead a little bit. When you identify a market, what are the next steps? How do you find a property? How do you grow in that market?
Yeah, so we are a little bit different because when I was at the beginning, I also try to hit those big brokers like Berkadia and Marcus and Millichap and JLL and CBRE. But I very, very fast learned that when they send an email out, it's being sent to 100,000 people, 300,000 people, and I'm going to get lost in that crowd.
Yeah,
right?
after their top guys have already had a crack at it, so you're getting sloppy seconds.
Exactly, and guaranteed out of the 300,000 people, they will find about 30 stupid people. And excuse my language, but I can't compete with stupid.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of that too.
Yeah,
a lot of competition, brother.
Generous and 30 out of 300. So we learned that it's more beneficial for us as starters, and with our portfolio of soon to be 250, we still consider ourselves starters, is to work with the smaller boutique shops, to work with the agents that have been around for, 20, 30 years. Try to look out for the people that started before the last crash. Because if they survived the last crash, they know what they're doing. They have the relationship to go through an economic downturn. And from that point, once we identify those brokers, we start building a relationship with them. We start talking to them. I'll take them out for lunch, or I'll take them out to coffee. I'll get with them face to face. I will try to understand what is their market, how do they see their market, and then I'll help them understand what is our criteria, what are we looking for, what will work, what will not work for us. And especially when it comes to entering newer markets, it's going to depend, for us at least, it's going to depend, do our third-party property management have presence in there or doesn't? If it doesn't, then I need to start identifying a new team. I need to find a new property management company. My real estate lawyer is licensed in Texas. So if I want to go buy in Oklahoma, I need to either find a new real estate lawyer or talk to my lawyer to make sure that he has a partner on the other side. And that's really the two major things that we do when we identify a new market, is make sure we have a team lined up well ahead of a purchase.
Attorney, property manager, attorney, property manager, and broker.
Yes, and a commercial mortgage broker, right? So we happen to have one that is lending nationally, so that's not an issue for us. But if you have a mortgage broker that is only local to your market and doesn't know how to lend outside of that market, then you're going to have to identify one of those over there as well. And insurance is the same thing. If you want to get an insurance and your insurance agency is only licensed in your state and try to cross state lines, you're going to have to find someone that knows how to do it in another state. So with that said, the building the team is one of the most crucial things. And I started saying well ahead of the purchase, because if you wait until you get on the contract to try to look for a team, it's too late. So that's one thing. The other thing, like I said, is working the relationship with the brokers, helping them understand what we're looking for. And I'm kind of skipping the fact because it seems obvious to me, but maybe I should say it, but you need to research the market to the lower level of neighborhoods, right? Real estate, and I've always said that, has invisible walls. You could have a property that's worth $1 million and you go one block down the street and it's worth $100,000. So for that aspect, so you won't make a mistake in a new market, you really have to drill down to the neighborhood level, to the zip code level, to understand the demographics, to understand where do those people work, right? The people that live in that neighborhood. And then never buy something without ever having boots on the ground. You have to be there. You have to drive the neighborhood yourself, daytime and nighttime, to really understand how the neighborhood react and operate in all hours. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen neighborhoods that look great on paper, and then you show up on site and you say, okay, I'm not investing here.
Yeah, so along that discussion, as you've built your investment career, what kind of surprises have you come across that might be beneficial to other investors to learn a little from your experience?
Yeah, so that last example that I gave was a really good learning. You can use Google Maps and you can Google Street View, and you think you understand the neighborhood, but then you show up physically on the neighborhood and it's not the same. And there is characters that usually see the Google car and they disappear into the house. Suddenly they're in the streets. And all kind of negative, usually it's a negative factor in the neighborhood that deters you. So that last lesson that I mentioned is always put your boots on the ground before you get into a contract is super critical. Mm-hmm. That caught us by surprise. Another thing that kind of surprised me was if you buy in a multifamily and you're trying to do a syndication, then there is a lot of legal paperwork that you're going to have to go through. And for people that have never understood the concept of syndication or read about it or really know what they're doing, it could be pretty overwhelming to get, 200 pages of legal documentation that you suddenly have to go through and understand and talk to a securities lawyer.
And let's back up here, because folks that have never heard that term before, you've told us already that you are using other people's money to invest with to buy apartments. And the way the securities rules work, if somebody is in the business, which you are, of earning somebody a cash flow where they do not have an active role in the business, then that is a security. And that is referred to as you are syndicating that. That's a securitized offering that you bring to the market. And I just want to make sure people understand that. On the equity side, Joseph is not using all of his money. He is investing with others and doing that through a securitized offering called a syndication. Joseph, how much are you paying for your documentation, your legal documentation, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't want to name the exact number, but it's over $10,000.
It's over $10,000. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's still reasonable. It can run up a lot higher than that.
Yeah, depending on how complex the deal is, no doubt about it. Now, I want to drill down a little bit too on. You had mentioned that you're not in primary markets in Class A. You're in secondary and tertiary markets and sort of looking for those value add deals. And you're based out of Plano, correct?
That is correct. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So that's 15 to 20 miles away from Dallas. That's a bedroom community. And I'm trying to equate that to Florida so people would understand. Is Plano a place that you would invest, or is that too close to Dallas for you?
So I would absolutely invest in Plano, but the problem is that Plano is way too expensive.
Okay.
So Plano is not really a bedroom community because a lot of major employers have their headquarters in Plano and not in Dallas per se.
Okay.
So it's not the best example, but Salina would be a bedroom community, which is where we bought our first property. And I would absolutely buy at the suburbs because when you look at the work market, and we're not talking about the retail, for example, but if you look at larger companies that have big headquarters, there's a big trend toward working from home, working less days per week. And with that coming in, people feel more comfortable living outside of city limits and living outside of public transportation. And these people create those bedroom communities to become larger and have retail in those communities. So now you start bringing the blue collar outside of city limits as well.
Okay.
So we don't have a problem looking at suburbs.
Yeah. So let's stop there. So Salina's 36 miles, 40 miles away from downtown Dallas, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So for the Florida folks, I mean, if you're in Miami, that's Homestead. If you're in Tampa, that's Pasco County, Newport Richey.
Yeah, it's Hernando. It's
moving up towards even Hernando, the southern part of Hernando County, northern part of Pasco County. So this is kind of giving people somewhat of an idea of like what you're doing and what you're looking for, but translating it to what it means in the state of Florida.
Yeah. So if you look at the state of Florida, do you have a city that is not Miami or Tampa or something like this, but is still large enough, let's say 200, 300,000 people?
Yes. Tampa's. I was going to say Florida is weird. And we're more weird than you are in Texas. And I'll explain that in a minute. We have a lot of beach, hundreds of miles of beaches. And on those beaches, we are solidly developed from Spring Hill all around the Horn of Florida and all the way up to Jacksonville, solidly developed on the coast. The coastal communities that are within a mile or 2 miles of the beach are significantly different than what you would find 12 miles inland. So like a town like Sarasota, for example, is a 300,000 person city. And it might fit what you're talking about, except for the fact that there's stupid money.
That's a lot of money. Then.
Sarasota and Naples would fit that, but Sarasota and Naples are the wealthiest, two of the five wealthiest places in the country, and the real estate in those towns are priced as such. And I think really, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's fantastic, right? Find those 200,000 people, very wealthy. Where do they people that serve them?
Yeah.
Live.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point.
There.
Yeah. And the other places, places like Lakeland, which is, you're going to the central Florida, and there's a lot of employment out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exactly. And then there's places, I mean, you look at, from Orlando, which it's always in the top 2 or 3 and fastest growing cities in the country. And there's places that are close to Orlando, but not really that close. They really are not having that much of a benefit. Melbourne and Palm Bay, for example, a lot of the Space Coast area in Florida suffered a lot because the NASA closed down, the space shuttle program shut down. And it really is away from Orlando. But there are a lot of blue collar folks there, and there's still a lot of blue collar activity. And I think those types of areas too, they're rebounding, they're reworking. The money now is coming into those communities because they were abandoned in 2008 for the most part. But we've got really in Florida these really exaggerated swings from one place to another. And you've got places like Katy. Are you familiar with the Houston area?
Yes.
Yeah, man, Katy. Like, what would you think about Katy compared to Houston? Like, would that be a place that you would buy, or is that a place that you would be like, it's really Houston?
No, so we love the Houston suburbs as well, right? So it doesn't have to be Katy; it can be Beaumont and towards the coast as well. There's a lot of great communities over there. So it goes back to the beginning of our conversation of where's the economic drivers, right? Where do these people work? What is the stability of that economics, right? If it's 30, 40 miles away from Dallas, I can see somebody drive that for a daily commute. But if you're 100 miles away from the city, then the chances that you're driving it are not that high. Mm-hmm. So that's really where do these people work is the number one question that we ask for every apartment community that we walk into.
Yeah, you're looking for the employment, the jobs. That's what you're looking for.
So with all the
you want them to pay rent, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
With the criteria that you have, and everybody who you talk to in the multifamily investment markets is complaining. There's really it's too difficult to find product now. Are you able to find product that meets your criteria?
There. Without that last twist, there's a lot of product out there, right?
Right.
But meeting our criteria is what makes things a lot harder, and especially for us, because I know everybody say that, but we are beyond conservative, and I've always been told that our underwriting is too conservative. But so for us, if it's on the market, it's probably not a good fit for us. So we work our relationship, we work with our brokers, we work with sellers directly. So I also am a licensed agent in Texas. So we're trying to reach out to sellers directly. We do marketing, postcards, yellow letters, whatever we can in order to get in front of those sellers and start having the conversation, because the minute that seller puts it on the market, it's already overpriced.
Of course, yeah.
So is there anything else for us, this is fascinating because even though we're Florida centric and a Florida based podcast, the principles that you're giving are universal.
Building blocks, blocking and tackling is the same. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask was the mortgage broker. You're using a national mortgage broker now. Are you doing agency debt, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, that sort of thing? Or what tell us about your financing?
Yeah. So when you get to the point where you do group investment, you have to pay your investors first, and you want to get paid as well, right?
Sure.
So that requires even more margins. And with today's market, the margins are really slimmed down by the sellers. So the only way for us to actually get a good return for our investors is to go agency debt. So we work with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac because they give us 30 years amortization, and most local banks will only give you 20, 25-year amortization for a Class C building. So that's a big difference for us. And obviously, they usually have better interest rates. And every once in a while, we can get 1 or 2 years interest only to help us through the rehab phase of the project.
So you're using someone who's national, like somebody like Walker Dunlap or Dunlop, or who are you using?
So actually, no, we're using a smaller mortgage broker. He just has a lot of connection across the country with the DUS lenders, the direct lenders with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Gotcha. So he shops us around. He tries to find us the best lender to go through, the best bank to go through into the Fannie Mae program. Okay,
so just before we let you go, are there any areas that just from a 30,000 foot view that you think are particular?
30,000 square foot. I thought you were talking about the space between your ears.
Well, it's much bigger than that.
Oh.
And it's full with neurons.
Oh, okay. But that wasn't what I was going to say.
Are there any other areas? Are there any particular areas in the country which you think are particularly ripe fruit?
Yeah. So Texas has a lot of secondary markets that we're looking into. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, Kansas City are also markets that we've started looking at. Jacksonville, Florida also is another area that we just at the beginning of looking into the market. And it goes again to where are the millennials and baby boomers heading to? And what would be a good destination for them? And what can we find that is reasonably priced and we can get value to our investors? So that's really where we will look at a lot of the parts of the countries. We do have a kind of a pause on border towns. So you mentioned Katy earlier, but South Texas and Southwest Texas, like El Paso, because of all the immigration limbo everything is at, they suffered a lot in occupancy in the recent 2 years. So we're trying to kind of put a hold on border towns.
Understood.
So, Joseph, how can people reach you if they want to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, and what are you looking for too? What anybody who's out there who might want to contact you? What kind of deals or people are you looking to connect with, Joseph?
Yeah, so again, this is a relationship business, so we will be happy to have a relationship with other brokers, with commercial mortgage brokers, with investors that might be interested in looking at our opportunities, and definitely sellers. If you're listening and you're a seller, we'll be happy if you reach out to us.
And you would consider something in Florida?
Absolutely.
Okay, gotcha. Terrific.
All right, great. And how can people reach you?
It's very easy. Our website is just 5 letters, ebgtexas.com. Stands for Eureka Business Group, so ebgtexas.com. And you have my phone number and my email right on the website.
Terrific. Joseph, we really appreciate the time that you invested with us today. Stephen, any last words before we let him go?
No, thank you, Joseph. I know you have ambitious goals for 2018, so we wish you lots of luck, and we hope to be hearing from you and see how you're progressing.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that was Joseph Gozlan from EBG out in Texas, talking to us about identifying markets, how to look at markets on the multifamily side, and some of the steps and pitfalls you might want to watch out for if you're a multifamily investor. Stephen, what were your thoughts about our discussion with Joseph?
Well, I very much enjoyed how he explained he has systems and he follows those systems. He has a system to identify a market. He has a system on what to do after he identifies a market and how to find properties. And he's also rigorous in sticking to his criteria. So I'm sure it creates a lot of extra work for him. But, at the end of the day, he drills down to get successful investment.
Yep, definitely. Apartment guys that are thinking about getting into the apartment guys, definitely some good ideas on that. And also the way that he gets money is syndication. We've had a number of discussions about the syndications. If you want to learn more about that, Stephen, how would investors, if they want to find out more about syndications or other multifamily or other investment ideas, where can they go?
Well, the very best place to go is the www.investfloridashow.com. That's our website. We have an archive of all our old shows or past shows. It's not old because it's still current, and it's an archive it's an encyclopedia of information.
Yeah, 3 years now. Yep, 3 years of shows. There's a lot of information there for you guys if you want to delve into it. Stephen, anything else before we let our good listeners go?
Yeah, please remember to help us get good guests. And so send us, just like us on Facebook, like us on
leave reviews,
Google. All those things help us because then we get guests that want to be on the show and we all get a better education from that.
Yeah, Joseph actually found us through our rankings on real estate investment shows. And because doesn't do single family, he does multifamily. You want to find more of a guys with commercial background. And that's how he found us. So, when you're filling that stuff out, you help us with rankings and you help us find guests, and guests will come to us. So hopefully you guys got something out of it. And as always, we appreciate the time that you invest with each and every episode. Until next time, hasta la vista.
You've just listened to the Invest Florida podcast with Eric Odom and Stephen Silverman. Join us every week for actionable real estate investment ideas, and of course, visit our website at www.investfloridashow.com for more shows and tips on how to earn a cash flow in the real estate market in Florida. While hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show have no reason to doubt the validity of comments of our guests, we do not warranty their accuracy. Please check with your legal, financial, and tax advisors before entering into any investment. Returns will vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. All information expressed in this show is for educational purposes only. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily shared by the hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show.